Oh, Jean-Philippe, you're home. I called you 5 times. Qu'est-ce que c'est? Message machine broken. Nice crib. Was that Berber carpet? Those fucking shoes you wear. What are they? Designer? Hmm? You fucking avoiding me, motherfucker? Where's my money? Oh, what are you gonna cry now, huh? Stand up, you frog-eating fudge-to-gods. I will fuck you up, man. Oh, Artie, head office. Come in. Jean-Philippe, you're home. Qu'est-ce que c'est, man? Message machine broken?
Qu'est-ce que c'est, man? Not checking your voicemail? Welcome to Cut to Black, a Sopranos sit down. I am Jim Scampoli. I've seen every episode of The Sopranos.
I am Jacob Burrows, and I've seen 45 episodes of The Sopranos. And we've arrived now at episode 6 of season 4. Everybody hurts. Just like the famous song says, there's a lot of hurting in this episode. But who made it?
This episode is written by Michael Imperioli. Yes, Christopher Moltisanti himself. This is not the first episode he's written. And directed by Steve Buscemi. Yes, that's Steve Buscemi, the director of Pine Barrens. And yes, we are rocking and rolling through season 4 here. And you always know you're in for a treat when not the very first scene, but at least one of the first scenes of the episode, you see AJ hanging out with his friends.
Yes, because it's rarely like, and then they hung out and nothing came of it. I guess that's kind of the case in this episode, but because usually it's like, let's break into this place, let's burn down the pizza place or whatever. That's might be a spoiler for next season. I wouldn't know. I've only seen 45 episodes.
Well, one thing actually, to back it up real quick to last week, we didn't call out that the ending song that they play as Tony's hanging out with Pyomai in the barn. Where is it? Yeah, My Rifle, My Pony, and Me by Dean Martin. It's from the movie Rio Bravo. Tony was watching that movie, specifically that scene with that song in the season 4 premiere for All Debts Public and Private. So you can stop emailing us about it. Yes, we did notice. But anyways, back to this episode.
Well, yes. Well, even before then, I wanted to say another way to get in touch. You can email us, but not about that. But you can email us at showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com. You can also leave a review on iTunes. I'll mention that up top, just in case you missed it. Really does help us out. Like, for example, Yankee Fan, heart, left a review that says, great podcast. Really enjoy reliving the best show ever. Keep them coming. Nice work, guys. You guys deserve to get your pin. Smiley face.
Hell yeah, we do. Hell yeah, we do. When are we getting? I should have been made right there on the spot.
Yes, and I saw a crow, and now I don't know anymore. Speaking of made men, like you mentioned, it's not quite the first scene, the one with the AJ. We do start out with Christopher in his natural habitat, drugged out of his mind, barely able to answer a phone, and he gets called out to go and talk to Tony there. And I'll just mention as well that the rest of that scene before we go back to AJ, that Tony lays out his plan. Like, he's laid it out to Melfi. Did he explain this to Melfi at some point, or am I?
Kind of did, because we were. I always talk about that because I think they do it in this episode as well, where I don't know how much detail he's giving her, because it drops into the scene and it seems like he explains his crime organization to her, and then he's giving him advice on it. But yes, he did kind of lay it out of how he's looking to, you know, just turn to his blood, which he does kind of break down to Christopher here, which it's such a perfect Christopher Moltisanti thing, because he's getting what he's always wanted here. This should be the moment for him. I mean, he should have already seen the signs of this happening, but Tony is laying it out for him, and he's fucking high off of his fucking head. Like, he doesn't even know what's going on, really. And he's, you know, at least from what I'm getting from this scene, he's not quite getting it either. Like, he's still not picking up what's happening.
Well, he's at least in, like, maybe the heroin makes him extra honest, because he does say, I just hope I'm worthy of it, which is like, yeah, that's the right reaction. And Tony's like, what do you mean? Why wouldn't you be worthy? And he doesn't go, I'm high on heroin right now. Because he does. Tony's like, have you been drinking? And he's like, oh, Adriana and I had a glass of wine. But yeah, he's getting everything he wanted. And they do mention that, like, oh, wait, what about Syl and them and Paulie? And it's like, yeah, they'll stay on, but there are no spring chickens. And this is the long game. And he's like, it just shows what a bad decision this is, because Tony's like, we're going to bring this thing into the 21st century. And he's like, but we're already in the 21st century. And he doesn't say it like a metaphor. He says it like Winnie the Pooh, not having any idea what he's talking about. So, you know, great decision, Tony. Great acceptance speech, Christopher.
Yeah, I mean, it should be noted that Adriana is also laid out with Chris. They're both high, because as we saw in the previous episode, she's kind of getting into shooting up as well. And I do like that Christopher is mirroring what he said to Adriana in the previous episode, where like he alludes to it to her, like, you don't know what he did for me. I've had this thing hanging over me, and I'd follow him through the gates of hell. And then he does say that to Tony, like, I'd follow you through the gates of hell. That's what I meant to say. And it's just, it just really affects me, because this should be this moment. This should be this great, like, everything's now, I can see clearly now. This is what we're doing. And Tony's basically saying, like, you're going to be the boss after me. Like, you're next in line. This is everything you've wanted, everything you've complained about. But, you know, I guess we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, and Tony is such a great, like, knower of, like, how things are gonna pan out, as we see in this episode. Like, it's a big thing, everything with Artie, but like, he can't see this clearly because he has an ideal vision in his head. And it is interesting that's, I mean, I haven't seen any more than this episode, but it feels like it's not going to end great for Tony. I feel like this is like a blind spot for him, because he has this sort of dream version in his head of how things should be with your family, and then with your other family, your mob family. Like, this is how things should be, and he's trying to keep everything the way he's imagined it. And then, like, it's like an American dream, and the thing about the American dream is it's rarely, like, comes to fruition in the way you want it to, right?
Yeah, and it's also like this thing of how you're blood, but isn't he, like, technically not Tony's blood? Like, isn't it that it's like Carmilla's cousin, and that, but he calls him his nephew? Yeah, in fact, he is the cousin of Tony's wife, Carmilla. He's a biological distant cousin of Tony himself. So does that mean that Carmilla is also his cousin? Like, I guess how deep do we go here?
Yeah, don't do any of those DNA tests. You might find out things you don't want to know, Tony. But I guess he does know, because he calls him blood. So, you know, great job. This will pan out great. Let's move back to AJ. He's hanging out with the cool kids. Like, these are characters, like, because before we've seen him with friends, but it's never really been like, this is this character. Even Meadow, of course, has had other characters circling around her, but this is the first time. And in the way they make the scene, it's like, whoa, who are these people? Like, I'm interested in knowing more about these people, kind of, because they have more personality than any of his previous friends that I can remember.
And shout outs to one of his friends is played by Paul Dano from There Will Be Blood, Little Miss Sunshine. I believe he was in The Girl Next Door as well. But yeah, he's just a familiar face if you've seen some of those movies. He's the kid with the long hair and the glasses. Right. And it is nice to see, like, kind of AJ's enjoying this attention of, like, you know, hey, your dad, like, your dad's this big mob boss. And even, like, as we see through this episode, the girl he's dating even says, like, oh, it's like I have this mafioso boyfriend.
Yeah.
You know, it's something interesting about him, and he's not embarrassed by it, but he's also, I mean, I guess he's not quite flaunting it. Like, he enjoys the attention, and then it gets to the point of, like, oh, let's go check out your dad's strip club. And since he's AJ, he brings them to the pork store.
Yeah, which is a great payoff, because I was just made uncomfortable by the notion that they would stop by and watch the strippers coming in and out. Like, that was the plan. They were having such a shit time that they were like, that will liven up this evening. Because they were hanging out in some basement somewhere.
To be fair, maybe this is an East Coast thing. I don't know. But I have a story very similar. If I could go into my own personal life for a moment. When I wasn't 18 yet, so I must have been like 16 or 17. And I remember me and my friend were hanging out. When you hang out in small towns, all you do is just drive around, like you just do whatever. And there was a thing where Jenna Jameson was dancing at like a strip club a town over. And we just drove there and like sat in the parking lot and like looked at the place.
Did you see Janet Jameson
No,
walk in and out?
No, I guess we thought we were gonna.
Did anyone walk in and out? Did you see anything interesting, Jim?
Just regular patrons, I imagine. That's it. Like nothing really. I don't remember anything of interest.
That's a great story. Okay, no, yes, it's true to life. This makes sense then.
Yes, I get where AJ's coming from, but yes, he's like, oh wait, this is the pork store, and then one of his friends like, it's a gay strip club, which is a great line.
Yes. Oh, that is very good. Because and then they just give up, right? They just
I think, and I think the girlfriend or the girl he's like hooking up with or whatever, you know, let's not put a label on it. I think she makes a comment like, "Oh, it looks Candlestein" or something like that. I just thought it was just a funny thing. Like they're trying to make the best of it, but yeah, to your point and the point of my real life, like it wouldn't have been that much different anyways if they did go to the Bing. They would have just drove up and looked at it and then left. So either way, mission accomplished, I guess.
Yeah, and of course AJ had, like you mentioned, the fact that he brought them there is funny, and he doesn't know where the strip club is. I mean, to be fair, like I use Google Maps for everything. I don't know where anything is, so fair enough.
Yeah, that is a thought I had too. I was like, oh yeah, because you did just go by memory. Like, okay, yeah, we go down Route 17, take a left, get off on this exit. Like nowadays, you wouldn't have that scene nowadays. They would Google it on their phone and then just Google Maps it, and they'd go right there.
You could probably even like Street View and go inside, like, and all the strippers' faces are blurred out, but not their breasts. Yeah, it would be great. Sadly, not yet. So next scene, we do have Tony actually coming home and getting into bed with Carmilla, and he finds out some unpleasant news.
Well, before that, she comes downstairs and runs into Furio because he needs to use the bathroom. They have like it's becoming more apparent that this is a real thing, kind of. It's not just Carmilla in her head, at least. The way Furio looks at her as well. I guess it's more reminiscent of the painter or wallpaper guy, but it just so happens to be, you know, Tony's dude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess so. Though, interestingly, she also tries to set him up with someone in this episode.
Yeah.
Which I guess makes sense because I don't like, yeah, she's like infatuated, but she doesn't I think she sees Furio as a piece of meat. Like Furio doesn't have any personality to her. So that's why because other potential relationships that could have blossomed up for her, at least with like the priest or whatever, there was more to it. But here it's like, yeah, I'll try to hook you up with my friend just so I don't have to be distracted by this anymore. Though she is enjoying the distraction, so I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. He is definitely more, I mean, even as a character, he is more of just like a blank page. Like,
yeah,
I like Furio, but it's interesting to think of when he was brought in, back in season 2 with the Italy episode and how Tony talked about bringing someone over who's loyal. And he pops up and has some good scenes, but there's not a ton there. And I guess that's kind of by design. I don't know.
Yeah, what about the rest of the guys? Because that was part of the deal. We're going to get more guys after Furio. I haven't seen those yet. Are they still on the boat? What's going on?
I guess so. Yeah, it takes a while. But yeah, as you alluded to, Carmilla does have some juicy gossip for Tony, as we learn that Gloria Trillo has committed suicide and she's dead.
Yep. Which is, I suppose, not super unexpected because that was the feeling when she was around, that like Tony just had to go there so that something bad didn't happen, and then like she was turning it into a situation where she wanted to get hurt by him, and he cleaned his hands of it and left the situation, which, you know, I guess is the right thing to do for him, but yeah, didn't really play out well for her.
Yeah, and I like how it's played out because he doesn't say anything because, you know, he really is being taken by this news. And obviously he can't react a certain way or else, you know, this was his mistress. And Carmela's like, oh, look at Mr. Empathy over here. Like she thinks he's just being like a dick about it. And you know, it's it's always inferred that these actors are great, but yeah, Gandolfini's doing some good stuff here. Like with his kind of blank face, almost in tears reaction to this news.
Yeah.
But then we get to cut over to Artie Bucco, who's on the verge of maybe a very lucrative deal here. His hostess's brother is bringing some, what is it, wine or I forget what
it's the new cognac or the new what is
New
it? The new
vodka.
vodka.
Yeah.
Look, Jim, Artie Bucco is really he's really excruciating to watch for me. I sent you a message that he's so embarrassing, and you know it's fine so far, but it's just that he's so impressed later when he talks to Tony and is like, "Oh wow, you saw how this would all play out," and I'm like, "Yeah, I saw how it would play out too, Artie, because there's this French guy talking about a great deal, and he just needs this 50,000 if you can get it to him, and as he like I thought what was happening here is he would get a point for like doing the introduction, but as he lays out like, no, I'm gonna essentially be the one borrowing the money.
Yep.
And he knows better than anyone what a bad idea that is. Like his whole restaurant was on fire, and he wouldn't take any help from them because he wanted to go like, well, he didn't really want to, but you know, he's so stupid. He's so goddamn stupid, Jim.
Well, one thing to defend him in this point, anyways, like the later on when he talks about how Tony saw that coming, I feel like he's right on the money, and even to the point that Tony saw Artie as a potential, like he saw this suicide thing happen, and he was looking for someone to save because even though he cares about Gloria and that she committed suicide, it's more about how he's caring about how he feels about it. It's not so much that he cares about her, really. And that's why he even says to Artie later on, like, what if I came to your house and found you dead from suicide? How am I supposed to feel about that? Like, it's about him. And like, even before Artie was saying all that stuff, I was just thinking like, oh yeah, Tony, this is the Happy Wanderer again. This is the T1000 when he saw how that was going to go with his sporting goods shop. Because Tony even said himself, like when he asked him, like, why'd you give me the money for the poker game? And he's like, I can't help it. I just saw how it was going to play out. Yeah. And I was going to own your sporting goods shop or whatever. We're going to tear this company down and get all of the money from it. Like in there, he's admitting it. And I feel like it's the same thing here.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is very interesting. It's a very interesting thing, and we'll get into more of the details. I just wanted to mention two details before I forget. First being that when the hostess says like, "Oh, I know you're connected to these people," Artie says, "Little pitchers have big ears," and he pinches her ear. And of course, her brother later rips off his ear and she also has an earring there. I feel like that's something that it's just one of those small details. I don't know if that was the writing or directing, probably a little of both. But yeah, it's not something you think of the first time around, but it's kind of fun.
That's a nice
and also another small thing of in the same episode, Carmela says, like you mentioned, calls Tony Mr. Empathy. And then later we have Meadow calling AJ like Mr. Polite over here when he's not introducing his girlfriend. So that's something that I think sort of been passed down, that mannerism. Even if Carmela and Meadow don't get along, they still have these similar patterns of speaking, which is kind of interesting.
Yes, and I know jumping around, but the moment and like it plays out later on, but when Carmela's talking about her yard grow and she's like, I don't even want to tell you how much it costs, and then there's a small beat as she's walking and she looks back and goes $3,000. Like she can't even help herself. Like she wants to tell you how much it costs. But yeah, we'll get there. There's a lot of great stuff in this episode. As we're only like 2 scenes in and we're already gushing over it. But yeah, so they need 50K for the, I'm looking it up, it's Armagnac. It's like a type of brandy, I guess.
Yeah.
And Yeah, we see that like the Charmaine and Artie relationship is interesting to me. I guess it's because they are separated, but they still have this business and kids and stuff. So what kind of a nightmare that is, that you still have to kind of work every day and have at least some sort of, it's hard enough in having kids and if you're on bad terms with your spouse, but now you have to work with them every day. And I like that Charmaine can just kind of sit back and just laugh at Artie Bucco, because in these early scenes, it's not clear if she understands what's going on, but later on, she even says like, "Oh, investment not going so good, Artie." She's like, all of a sudden, she wants to play the hide the salami with you or whatever the comment is. So she does know that he's just a pathetic fool, and things are blowing up in his face.
Yeah, and I don't know if we've seen much of them it was a while ago, but I remember them standing a bit closer at some point, after they had their big fight. But then we also see Artie in this room with these square mirrors, which has a really nice visual effect. And I'm assuming that's like his bachelor pad that he's set up in now.
Yeah.
It's got to be.
Yeah.
But yes, we between this and that, we have Tony showing up to the car place to kind of squeeze some more information about what's going on. And this car salesman says that it happened like a few months ago that she offed herself, and that he doesn't know much, but apparently she wasn't lucky with men, and I'm like, but it's been like a year, and then I'm like, oh wait, no, but it hasn't. This was the thing. It's only been a few months, so it was right after, just like he says, and there's some other scenes in between, but him coming into Melfi's office again, and like going in like, oh, business okay, everybody hunky-dory, like he's so tense and so angry, and her reaction makes like it that's a great scene as well, with him like threatening her and being mad and saying like, why didn't you help her, and like obviously she tried, and the confidentiality, like I can't tell you certain stuff even though she's passed away, and maybe especially because she's passed away, maybe she knows stuff that would help him but she can't say. It's a really good scene.
Yes, yeah, and even like Tony goes for when he's initially getting worked up, doesn't he have a line that's something like Gloria's still hanging around, and it's such a like, ugh, like it really is. I think to use a Melfi line where it's like, you really threw that at me like a rock. And then but he gets to the point of like, in season 1 when he did this was like a crazy insane deal where, because it's the same thing where he's hulking over her, he's in her face, he fucking throws the tissue box, and at that point she had to like get him out of there and lock the door, and she was scared. But now it's almost like this weird, she knows that Tony can do this, but obviously she's afraid and upset, but I guess she knows maybe he's not gonna smash her face into 1,000 pieces like he said that time.
Yeah, and he even picks up after himself, picks up the tissue box and says she was a good kid, but fucking crazy. and he wants to alleviate his guilt, basically.
Yeah, because like you said, I do feel like Melfi knows more, and with that statement she is trying to say she knows more. But I think Tony wants to live in this moment that it's all because of him, because he even says, she did it after me, admit it. Like, that's all. Like, there's this weird kind of, not joy, but I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's almost like he does, there's a part of him that feels good of like, she couldn't replace me, so she just had to end it all. Like, even though he's definitely upset, there's this weird sense of like joy he's getting out of it, I feel.
Well, he's talking to, I mean, again, jumping around like crazy, but he's talking to his sister later and asks if she knew someone who committed suicide, and asks, like, did you feel guilty? And she's like, yeah. And I think that's maybe helping him see that everyone, even though it's selfish when he's like, how would I have felt, Artie, if I found you dead? Even though that's kind of a selfish way of thinking, everyone also thinks like that, and everyone feels guilty when something bad happens. Sure. So yeah, he I guess it's not right to say that he likes sitting in that moment, but he can't help thinking it's all about him, because he does see himself as a weird sort of person who spreads death around him. And I believe he's said several times, I don't know if it's both in this episode, but he asks, like, what, am I, a toxic person? And, like, that's the big question for him, I think.
He does say, yeah, I believe he does say that in this this episode. But also, actually, now that we're talking about it, does this count as the death counter?
Yeah.
It's got it, right? I don't know if you pulled up your counter beforehand or not, but
I did. So we were at 33 deaths. Let's pump that up now.
Actually, I got to pull up my counters. God
I
damn.
already raised mine. God, do you have the sounder at least?
I got to pull it all up.
God,
I got to pull it all up.
Jim, I don't know how to go on without hearing the sound.
There. Okay. No, we love the sounds. We didn't get to play it last week, so now it's exciting because we get to play it here.
Yeah.
Sorry. But
whatever.
All right. I got my counter up. I'm waiting for the sound to come up. We should talk about
we were just like sorry, just a moment ago we were like, yeah, and then whenever anyone commits suicide, it's very serious and we feel bad, but we gotta have the guts of Malanga.
All right, I got it now. All right.
Okay,
let's
good.
throw it on the counter. Here we go.
Yep.
Guts of Malanga.
There we are.
There we
so,
go. Now everything feels right in the world.
Yeah, sure. So if you're keeping track now, we're at 12 storm outs and 34 deaths. And like you mentioned, Jim, I can't believe this wasn't a storm out.
Yes.
You know, it's such a buildup, and then, what a tease.
I guess it's interesting because the reason that it's not a storm out, it shows growth, but also regression in the Tony and Melfi relationship. And actually, I was thinking about it. When was the last time we saw Melfi before this? I mean, I guess not in the last episode, right?
No, because I was like, whoa, I've not seen Melfi in a while.
I guess we did. We saw her at her therapist in the episode before that. So she was in that. That was the one with talking about Jason regressing and Bard and then his daughter and all that. So, but yeah, it's weird because it did feel like it was a while.
Well, as far as therapy in general, I feel like there's not been a lot this season at all. Am I right?
No, I think you're right. Like, they only use it for these moments, kind of like we are talking about earlier, where it cuts in and it seems like he's explaining his crime organization to her and she's giving advice on it. But it doesn't, we get so close to a storm up, but we don't get it. And then before that, we did see Artie go to Ralphie for the money. And Ralphie does make a smart decision here. Gonna have to pass. It makes complete sense because this is Tony's friend, and he's not going to be able to collect the same way he typically does. Because then after Tony goes to therapy, he shows up at Artie's place. And it's weird because Artie he's pathetic, and I love this actor. Like, he's so good as Artie. But Artie also was making the good decision. He wasn't going to go to Tony for this money. He was like, Ralphie wasn't going to give it to me. Forget it. Not a big deal. Like, he even says, if this was like life or death, like one of my kids had a tumor or something and I absolutely needed it, I would come to you. But this is just a dumb business thing. Who cares? And that's why it shows even more so the way Tony's pushing it is that Tony's in need of saving someone right now. And Artie's like a pathetic piece of shit. So this is the happy wanderer.
Yeah, and it is an interesting decision that he goes to Ralphie at all because, I mean, he's got to know that Ralphie's a worse person to borrow money from than Tony for him personally. But then Tony, I don't know, like, what's his think? Because he thinks he's going to get the money, but like, so how? what's he doing? I don't know. He's going to Ralphie. Why?
Oh, what's Artie doing or what's Tony doing?
What's Ralphie doing? Sorry, no, what's Ralphie doing?
I mean,
what is Artie doing going to Ralphie? What do you think?
I think it is just like he said, like he's smart enough in the fact that, like, I mean, maybe he also does know that even though he's not going to Tony directly, Tony will still give him some sort of protection.
Yeah, and he wouldn't lie to Tony. He can lie to Ralphie, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was impressed by Ralphie's decision there. And first I thought it was kind of like, yeah, I don't want to hurt you and take over your business, but it's like, no, I won't be able to. And
Yeah.
that was like a lot of that in the previous season there, where it's like, no, I can't do this because Tony's stopping me, and they're best friends now. So that, but he wants to keep it that way.
Yeah, so Tony kind of talks him into it, and he kind of even plays up like, "Oh, you don't come to me, we're friends," and Artie's saying that's kind of the reason why. Then he tells him about this deal, and then Tony takes the bottle and storms out drinking. And not really storms out. That doesn't count. And then we get to go right into what Sopranos loves, the dream sequence.
Yes.
And it is kind of Dream 101 stuff going on here, but it's in my opinion, it's welcome. She's got the thing around her neck, and Tony keeps looking at it, and we know what that represents. He looks up. It is a pretty haunting shot with the chandelier and the ceiling, and you see like there's cracks in the ceiling from where she hung. She ties it into sex as well, because she's like, "Do you want to see this or do you want to see this?" And I mean, there's like, we're in a dream. They're not trying to trick you at all, because we know this character's dead. So it's not like this thing where it's a surprise that he wakes up, but we're seeing Tony's inner workings here.
Yeah, and the very first second I thought it might have been a flashback, but then you notice the thing around her neck, and of course it's very clear it's a dream. The way they use regular motion and then slow motion, like, it was a super effective shot when she gets up out of his lap and moves over to the kitchen, and this black long trail sort of goes behind her and billows out like she's in a black wedding dress or something, and it's in slow motion. Don't know what's in the actual oven, because there's like some weird squishy sound of her preparing the food, but then you start noticing the flakes come down, which is, it's always more effective when you don't show the bad thing, and you just show what's around it. So usually not a huge fan of dreams, but I like this one.
Yes, yeah, I think it's pretty effective. And then because then we get back to Brian's back, and Tony, I guess they've kind of worked out the trust that Tony's okay with, the living trust. I guess this is the less locked in version of it. But Carmela's pretty happy. So I mean, I don't know the specifics here. I just assume since Tony's signing it, it's not the one they were talking about before. They've made some adjustments or something.
Yeah. First I thought because she was so happy, it had to be him now agreeing to the thing. And I thought that was kind of maybe part of what he was doing in this episode, that like he made Gloria kill herself, he feels. So he wants to make everyone around him happy. Like, the money doesn't really matter. Let's make Carmela happy. Let's get Artie what he wants and needs. Let's just get everyone okay. But they do mention it is the living trust, I think. So that means it is the other thing that he'd already agreed to. And again, the thing with Artie isn't really him being helpful either. At the same time, he's trying to present something more positive into the world. Like, even just when he's taking his Prozac and Carmilla's yelling like, Brian's here, he like has this weird grin on his face when he's yelling down to her again, like, I'm gonna be down in a moment. But it's like the fakest thing, because he's and he's smiling a lot and just trying to be, not super sad.
Yeah, just trying to trick yourself, kind of act the part. And then, he pushes Brian deeper into his kind of thing, because he has him call Patsy for a suit. Because as we know, Patsy also supplied Tony with the fur coat. Yeah. And then we see Artie kind of handing over the money that he got. He hands it over to the Frenchman, Jean-Philippe. And then we got AJ making out on the couch at home when Carmela walks in. And as we mentioned, the Yardro. And this is such a dumb thing to point out, but because they have the funny moment where AJ has to get up to turn down the sex music that they're listening to. Yep. And he gets up, he walks to the TV and picks up the remote and turns it down. Then he leaves the remote by the TV. And I mean, like, it's comical because he has to cover his boner or whatever. But then I'm like, bro, take the remote to the couch, my guy. What are you doing? That's what the remote's for.
He's not clear-headed, Jim. He still got poison running through him. He didn't get it out. So, but yeah, you're right. He just puts it back. That's not what remotes are for. But yeah, I was surprised coming into a scene with him making out with some girl. I was like, huh, okay, AJ, fair enough, good job.
Do you think this means he finally killed that bug that was in his room? They have a new thing for him to do besides trying to jump around. Like, how far young little AJ from season 1 has come.
Yeah, that's true. And like, I think, I don't know, he's such a nice, airheaded young man. Like, I don't think he's not, he's never really, like, yeah, he's rude a lot of the time, but it's all through like this. He's the happy wanderer. Like, he doesn't know. Like, he's just like, huh, oh, he just wanders through life, and he has pizza and things get thrown in pools, and he's kind of like, I don't know. And they're like, why did you do this? I don't know. What? And now there's a girl here saying, oh, I really wanted to be alone with you. And he has a great idea. Oh, my sister will definitely let me use her dorm, I guess.
Yeah, to have sex in her bed. And it's because he doesn't even, and when he calls her, he doesn't like say that. He doesn't ask. He just says, yeah, let's hook up. And then he wants to just spring it on. I guess that's kind of part of it. Like, oh, I'm not going to ask because she'll say no. Maybe if I just corner her at her place. And I like that there's this sign here of what's to come with this girl, his girlfriend, Devin, because he mentioned something about getting on the bus or the train or whatever. And then she's like, well, just get a car service. And he doesn't think much about it. But even I was like, she's going to hire a car service? All right. That's a clue, AJ. Things are maybe not what they seem.
Yeah, and I mean, I think she's like, "Oh, bus is so smelly" or something, and then you get a car. That's how you do it. And yeah, I thought when he was calling, I thought it would maybe be some sort of wordplay where he's like, "No, I said I wanted to hook up with her," like, but no, it just doesn't play out well for him at all. But Meadow's all down to hang out at least. I mean, I guess it is kind of similar to me and my siblings. We don't talk much, but when we do, like, oh yeah, no, let's hang out, let's do something.
Yeah, and I feel bad too because she even like had a plan, like, oh, one of my friends is doing like a reading over it, and it sounded like such cool, like hip New York things to do. Like, we'll check out this coffee shop where they're doing like poetry readings, and
oh yeah,
like,
cool.
And she does even make that statement of like, you're in this like cultural epicenter and you want to have sex, and but in a way it's like, well, yeah, he's what, 16 or something, of course he does.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like you mentioned, she mentions like, oh, I thought it was gonna look exactly like in Godfather or whatever, and she says it's like I'm some mafioso's girlfriend, so I guess they're dating probably.
Yeah, and it also is a good opportunity. We do see that Meadow is making good on the thought she had earlier this season of looking into criminal justice or whatever. She's working at the South Bronx Law Center. And yeah, I like that. And it's another thing of them they think they're going to NYU, I guess, because they're like, this doesn't look like NYU. Like, they're so aloof yet again. Like, when they think they're going to the Bing and they end up at Satrielli's. They think they're going to NYU and they're just at a law center and they're all confused about it.
Yeah, and I mean, AJ's in a bubble just because he doesn't pay attention or know much about the world, but she's also, though she doesn't necessarily seem stupid, she's also insulated from the world around her, I think, in like, oh, we'll just get a car, and this looks like Harlem, and the driver's like South Bronx, and it locks the doors when they leave. And although, I mean, she's self-aware enough, they're in the car after that, sort of talking about how, oh, wow, we are so fortunate with all our money. And he's like, yeah, so fortunate with all our money. And yeah, sort of leading into the end.
Yeah, he's having this epiphany where he's like, and they keep kind of cutting to B-roll of just people in the streets, just kind of going about their lives. And he's just like, look at how these people live, and my dumb mother and her $3,000 yard row. And then they bring up one of their friends, and like, even him, like, he's kind of wealthy, but he doesn't even have a dining room.
Yeah. Just 5 people in that little box. Yeah.
It's so cringy, but so like, it's weird. It is weirdly progress, but it's also like, ooh, okay.
Yes. So anyway, speaking of progress, Artie is flirting with the hostess, which is enough for Charmaine to deduce that things aren't going right. Something's clearly wrong here with this investment. And we also get a quick scene of Adriana bowing out of Billy Joel because, we have all these problems with Crazy Horse, and, you know, he's sick. Yeah, he has looked pale, Christopher, hasn't he? So, yeah.
Yeah, his skin looks bad or something, they say.
Yeah.
And then we have Tony and Jan. Yeah, because Tony and Janice are at dinner, and that, like we mentioned earlier, he's asking about if she knew anyone with suicide. But that's when he does ask the question, "What am I, a toxic person?" I forget why though. I forget the specifics on what she says. Like she didn't go to him for something, I believe. So again, he's just, he is a toxic person. So the answer to that question, Tony Soprano, is yes.
Yeah, I thought he said it twice in the episode, but yeah, because she's upset that what was the reason he invited her out again? He brings it up because they're having a good time just hanging out, and they're talking about Bobby. Yeah, it's about Bobby. And that's when he says, "What am I, an ogre? What am I, a toxic person?" I think he says it to Artie again later. But either way, yes, that's the scene, and it's a good scene with Janice and him because we rarely get to see these scenes where things are okay with them and they give each other things they actually need and want. So it's kind of nice.
And then what we have, because then Artie goes to Tony in the bathroom to tell him that, there's some issues going on potentially with this money. He knows it's due in a few days, but he can't get a hold of John Philippe. And then Tony gives him kind of a nice pep talk of like, he's really breaking down the business because people start missing a payment, then they act like they're doing you a favor by even giving you some of the money they owe. So, you got to go over there. And this is really like, there's no way Tony thinks that Artie's going to get something done here, right? Like he really is kind of putting things in motion, I feel.
I almost thought that this was like Tony bringing him into the fold because it's always been a thing where it's like, is Artie going to be in or out? And he's kind of he's hangs out with Tony all the time, but he keeps him separate. But then he helps him with this and they help him with that. And this was almost like, okay, so, I mean, if this scene had gone differently and he'd beaten that guy up, he would essentially be like pulling in, like he'd be an earner like Ralph, And he's not. It's clearly not. But yeah, that's what I was thinking, because he was treating him like, no, this is how it works. Let me explain it to you. Now go do it. And he didn't.
Yeah. Because then we get to the scene that opened the show where he's kind of doing the Travis Bickle taxi driver. You're talking to me in the mirror. It's such a tried and true thing to use in your media or movie or TV show to have a pathetic character. I mean, not that Travis Bickle's pathetic, but usually this version of it is a pathetic character kind of talking tough to himself. And sometimes it's a reveal. They kind of use it as like a reveal. Like you think maybe he's talking to the real guy, but now he's just kind of getting himself amped up. And I love the payoff because it's just such a small, like I love his choice when he says "qu'est-ce que c'est" and the answer machine broke. He says it in he's not like over the top pathetic, but it's so toothless. And I love that the guy, even for a second, like the guy's not even for a second worried that Artie's at the door.
Yeah.
Like he's kind of bummed it's him because he looks like he's maybe expecting someone else, but he's also not afraid.
Yeah. And then he, instead of sticking to the script, he starts going, "My daughter needs braces," and then starts cursing at him a lot and trying to choke him, which takes the guy by surprise because he doesn't think that Artie would ever do that. But then Artie gets beaten up, essentially. I mean, they do sort of throw each other around for a moment there, and a lamp gets broken, but then he rips his earring out and shoves him out the door and says, "If I ever see you again, I'll kill you." Great stuff. Very embarrassing.
They intercut it real quick from him in the mirror to him showing up with Chris getting high with his friend, just as like a quick reminder that, yeah, Chris is still fucking up. So he hasn't really learned anything from this new information he got from Tony that he's kind of on the upswing.
Yeah, because that scene is like nothing. It's like, it's there. You nailed it. I mean, that's what it's there for, I think, because at the start, it's like he has to sober up and go meet Tony, slap his face and all that. And then he's still doing up to his old tricks. So he's clearly not worthy.
Yes. Yeah. Then we go. It is weird the way these other scenes are intercut with Artie's like, attempted suicide, but then AJ at his girlfriend's house, because it doesn't feel like they're happening at the same time type deal. It's just weird. It's just a way to break these up, I guess.
Oh, yeah, you're right. because yeah, they just it's definitely not at the same time. I feel because
It's like
it's not.
daytime.
I assume it's not a day that Tony is. Well, maybe it is
Yeah.
screwing this Icelandic, I assume, hostess or whatever. And yeah, so but breaking down the scenes, we do have AJ arriving at this huge manor house. I love that they think that like the little gatehouse is the actual house, and then they come through. It feels very Gilmore Girls to me, kind of thing, you know, where you think you're rich, but then you meet the really rich people. It's been something you've seen in lots of media.
Yes, yeah. The realization, and then like I love how his friend is kind of, he's like, this is like an original printing of Rubber Soul, and then what, she has Picasso's on the wall.
Yeah.
Like, your dad's not afraid we'll steal these.
Yes. And there is indeed a volcano on Iceland. And Tony gets the call because Artie is. I didn't even put it together. I just thought it was like, yeah, his ear's in pain. He's taking it for the pain. But no, clearly he's trying to off himself, crying in his chair, calling up Tony, and Tony needs to rush off. But then, like, he's like, "What the fuck am I doing? Call 911." So, which I didn't even think of. I was like, "Yeah, you got to get over there, Tony." But like, yeah, no, smart.
Yeah, because at first I almost thought it was just that Artie was drunk and sad and depressed, and that Tony was making it into this suicide scenario to save someone. But then, yeah, I guess it is clear that he did take something, and they had to pump his stomach. But I also, not to diminish like suicide or Artie's feelings, it was clearly a cry for help, but those are still to be taken very seriously.
Yes. And I mean, even more serious now is AJ's befuddlement at his girlfriend's economic status, and he's really messing it up because he's like, "Oh, well, I thought you were I thought you were regular rich like me. I thought we were on exactly the same level of rich, but you're so rich." And he's like Cinderella, and he doesn't even get it. Like you just fucking chill out and have a sandwich. Like I know. To be fair, in reality, you'd probably react differently because, you know, we hate the 1% and all that. But, yeah, like, fucking have some pizza, enjoy the Picassos.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do like that. I guess it's just because he feels foolish with his big awakening. Because now he's having even another awakening that, you know, for you looking down upon these other people, like people can, even though you're pretty well off, there are some people that kind of look down upon you. Like you're thinking about how your friend doesn't have a dining room, and she's thinking about how you don't have like an armed guard, outside your home or whatever.
Yeah, and he does have kind of a point where he's like, but if it wasn't such a big deal, why didn't you tell me? Because it is. But then you wouldn't go around like, by the way, my armed guard said this the other day, and I don't know his name. Hilarious. Like, so I guess it makes sense. But he is living the dream. I mean, this is from what young adult fiction and movies have taught me. This is what you want. You want to hook up with someone who's richer than you, and then you have a small misunderstanding, and then you live happily ever after.
Absolutely. And it's supposed to be kind of like when you find out, yeah, you're a little annoyed, but then it's also an opening to a whole new world. But back with Artie, Artie's breaking down. How am I supposed to pay you back?
Take the restaurant.
Take the restaurant. 50,000. I could never pay that back. And I love one of my favorite moments is then Tony goes, well, actually it's 51.5 and technically you already missed a payment.
Yeah.
I love it so much. And yeah, they kind of do have this like sweet moment, like because they have been talking about his tab, and you were like Artie was. You could see that Artie was getting a little annoyed when Tony and Janice were out, and she's like, "I know it's expensive, but can we have whatever the wine that she brings up?" And then Tony's like, "Leave the bottle," but we know it's not like he's doing anything because he already has a $6,000 tab. He's never gonna pay. Not even post this thing with him giving him the money, like he wasn't going to pay it anyways, but he's acting like he's doing this great thing for his sister. But either way,
well, so it is to reverse the earlier scene. It is like, oh, they miss one payment and suddenly they're acting like they're doing you a favor when they give you anything. That's him with the tab. I bet there would have been a scene in between where he's like, oh, here's 1,000. You're welcome, for the 6,000 tab, and that's just gonna keep growing. But I guess, yeah, they agree to wipe the tab. And what do they say about the guy? They're gonna murder him, or like
Well,
what does he
Tony,
say?
I mean, Tony says he's going to assume the guy's dead.
What does
So,
that mean? Oh, assume is dead.
so it means like he's not going to hold. He doesn't have to make Artie go and collect it. Like now, this guy is basically Tony's client, and that's why we see Furio show up later, and we assume that I don't know he cut his toes off and beat him with a the phone book. He got his. He's going to get his, and they're going to get their money one way or another.
The reason I was confused is that my subtitles say I'll assume the guy's dead with a D at the end.
Oh no,
So it should be dead, right? That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So he'll just collect it, and it'll be fine. Well, that's good. But then the cobwebs are removed. Is that a reference to something, like, or is he just being poetic?
I think he's just being poetic. Like, yeah, it's like he can see clearly now. And the thing is, why this is such an Artie thing is you can have this realization.
Yeah, just shut the fuck up about it.
Yeah, shut up. You don't have like just quit while you're ahead because you still fucked up. Given Tony, I do see that Tony manipulated some of the situation, but you fucked up. You don't need to then do this. And it is kind of like whether he asks Artie am I a toxic person or not, Artie's answering the question for Tony here by telling him that, you know, you saw this all happen. And Tony just reacts like, you know, you suicide. He calls him a suicide or something like that. Like,
yes.
And then he starts, you know, then he you know, turns into real Tony Soprano and he just tells him, you know, he starts laying out what he's going to say. You got mugged. This happened. Some kids came. They pulled your earring out. You fucking started drinking and took some for the pain.
Yeah, and I mean, he wasn't going to take his wallet at first, but he takes his wallet because he's just annoyed, right?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Keep the story straight. Might as well really take your wallet.
Yeah, which almost made me, because I wasn't completely clear on it, I almost made me think like, okay, so he is going to bleed him now, or no? Okay, I guess not. But yeah, he says, you fucking suicide, you're disgraceful. And then that turns back, and then he's like, oh, I'm sorry, and he starts crying again. To be fair, I guess he's still kind of fucked up. That's why he's like, whoa, I can see clearly, man. You're like a hawk.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, I mean, I like it. I mean, I like the Artie and Tony relationship. And it's like, you know, we've come a long way from when Artie at one point had a gun on Tony.
Yeah, I was thinking of that scene as well when he was like, oh, I've got the cobwebs knocked off. I thought it was like, oh, you've now manipulated me, so I'm even more relying on you, and like I like you more. I thought that was what he meant at first, looking back at the whole gun thing.
But yeah, then we cut to what the blind date, the Billy Joel date, and they're playing the like bottle of red, bottle of white, whatever it is, the Billy Joel song. And Carmela is kind of giving some looks to Furio's blind date. It's like the old careful what you wish for, I guess, because I do agree that she wants to kind of try to get Furio out of her head, like set him up with a nice girl, he'll settle down, have a family. But now it's like, well, hey, that's my man, bitch. Who you were doing with my man?
Very true. And yeah, and it's interesting the way she brings up this girl at first. It's like she seemed to very enjoy my description of Furio. Like she's clearly engineered the whole thing. It's not like, oh, they liked each other, we should make sure they meet again. It's like, no, she's made this happen. So there is certainly that element of like, oh, what did I do there? But either way, the suit looks great.
Yes, and yeah, again, like this guy is getting deeper in with Tony, and I guess that's a good thing. I mean, is this Tony being a hawk again? Does he see maybe more potential into getting into the financial biz and some sort of angle? I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, every time you say, I guess we'll have to see, I'm like, what he said is definitely happening. And I don't know how clearly you remember your first view.
Well, if you remember correctly, I will say that it's seasons 1 through 3. I remember very clearly when we're getting into way more hazier areas for me with seasons 4, 5, and 6. So I honestly don't know.
Well, I'll say when he's like, oh, Tony being such a great guy who I'm proud to call a new friend and all that. It's like, even though he is obviously quite insulated in his mafia thing, it's still like most people wouldn't be pals with him, wouldn't respect him in that way, because this guy's actually like, oh, you're such a great guy, Tony. He said it several times, and that must be kind of nice. And I think you're right as well on the angle of like, because he keeps mentioning how like the future is different, we got to bring it into the 21st century and all that. Having a guy who knows how finance works is going to be good if we can. So let's get him even deeper into this. You know, maybe we want him to owe us money and then he'll help us out, or, you know, he'll just be the guy who fiddles the numbers. Everyone needs a bookkeeper.
And I think there's a nice parallel with AJ's girlfriend Dylan here, where she's kind of like likes the idea of dating a mafioso or whatever, however she phrases it. Like you get to kind of vacation in this world, and I feel like that guy is playing off of that as well, Brian, because he got the hook up on a nice suit, and like he even said, like he enjoys like nice suits. That's his vice, and we've seen it with other characters throughout this show of like civilians and like I guess regular citizens. You kind of like having this moment where you could tell your friends like, yeah, I had dinner with Tony Soprano, you got me this nice suit. And then they don't always know what they're getting into. I even like the Cusamanos, like we saw that when they went golfing with Tony, but then they kind of made him feel bad.
Those bastards. I guess I feel less bad for Tony having watched more of the show. Thinking back on that, I'm like, yeah, he is kind of an animal. Wrapping up the episode, we have Tony again with Melfi, and he's sort of decompressing what Artie said to him now, and she asks if he thinks she would have, if he would have done it the same if it hadn't happened right after Gloria, because obviously the whole episode is really about her and him.
Yes, yeah, and he does that. He says, "Am I a hawk?" And she asks him, why does he have these pangs of conscious about it now? Like, why is he feeling bad about it now? And I think the question is clearly because of Gloria and his guilt. And I still think, to me, it's just still all about him, more so in a way than just a regular person makes it about themselves, because from what we know about Tony, that's how he is.
Yeah. And I think as well, in general, in him, there's a lot of self-hatred that we see from time to time. And that's kind of part of it as well, that he feels like he is a toxic person. That's why he mentions it. He is like a hawk. And the fact that Artie says it's instinct, that he didn't even like, because of course, Melfi's like, did you? When he says like, he says I did this, like, well, did you? And he's like, I don't know. Artie says it's instinct, and he has described himself like that. So yeah, it's coming to terms with who and what he is. And then we have, I think it's the last one here, of AJ hanging out with his friends. And to make it a nice contrast, it's just the boys this time. So of course there's wrestling going on, and they're in this basement, and it's like so different from the party at the rich girl's house. And he's just sort of embarrassed about the whole thing at this point.
Yeah, and I think that what they ask him, like, how come you don't have Don Corleone money? Like, why don't you have that Don Corleone money? And then he has to really ponder it. He's like, I don't know. Why don't I?
It's because they don't have Brian on board yet, so they can't make all the money legitimate. I mean, I feel like Tony has that money, but it's all in the bird feeders.
Yes, yeah. And then, I mean, I think they're indirectly getting at this point a little bit, but a lesser show would like hammer it harder and maybe they get into it later, I forget, but it's like, who's the real criminal here? Huh? These financial fat cats taking advantage of the everyday person, or, Tony Soprano. But I guess we'll see.
Yes. It's going to be fun. So if you had any particular impression of AJ's new girlfriend, why not send it to showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com. Like we also mentioned at the top there, we really appreciate all the reviews coming in on iTunes and other review platforms. Do send one in. We may read it out on the show. We may not, especially not if you don't write it. So please do. And Jim, of course, can be found at jimandthem.com. My work can be found at awesomepedia.org. Is there anything else, Jim?
Well, there's just one more thing to be said.
What's that?
Cut to black.